Okay, so here we go. I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Charlie Gardner, who is a scientist from just up the road in Kings Lynn. Over to you, Charlie.
Thank you, Julie. I'd like to echo Julie's sentiments and thank you all so much for coming. Honestly, it's just the most uplifting sight to see. We live in really difficult times and we don't get a lot of good news. But to see that so many people are here together, so many people are prepared to, start thinking about rising up against these problems we have. It makes me realise that we are not alone in this, and this is what gives me hope. So I'm uplifted already, thank you. So we're going to be talking about the climate and ecological emergency that is, so increasingly obviously causing problems in all our lives. And we're going to be talking about what Extinction Rebellion are doing about that. I'm going to start with an apology because I'm going to be reading from notes. This isn't my talk. This is a talk that a lot of people who know about how to communicate effective and tell effective stories have put a lot of time into. This is part of a nationwide tour. It's going up and down the country. And because other people have put in a lot of effort into this, I want to make sure I get it right. So I will be reading from notes and I apologise. It's going to take about half an hour, perhaps 40 minutes. Towards the end of it, we're going to hear from two other local Cambridge residents who are members of local Extinction Rebellion group and are going to be telling you a little bit about their journeys and what they get out of XR. And then at the end, as Julie mentioned, she's going to lead us on a listening exercise. And some of the stuff we're going to be talking about is very heavy. We're talking about the possible destruction of everything we know and love, and it takes a lot of courage to face up to that. It's most people have not yet found the courage to face up to that. So well done, all of you, and thank you again for being here. These issues are deadly serious, and they're not getting the attention they deserve, and that's what we're about. We're about trying to break through these awful silences about everything. So I'm going to start by asking you just to turn to your neighbour. Introduce yourself to someone that you haven't met before. And we're going to do this for 3 minutes. You're going to take 1.5 minutes each. And perhaps you could explain why you're here, or whether there is something, what you're concerned about that brought you here. We'll let you know when 1.5 minutes has passed. Actually, can I ask someone to time that, because I don't have a phone on me. So could someone let us know when 1.5 minutes has passed? Thank you. Right, sorry to bring you all back while you're deep in your new friendship. But I'm afraid we have important matters to be getting on with. I hope you made a nice new friend anyway. So I'm Charlie, and I'm a conservationist, a wildlife conservationist. Ever since I was really young, all I wanted to do was have an impact on the natural world, to stop it being destroyed. And rather naively, I thought that the way to do something about that was to become a scientist. So I thought that if we've got these massive global problems, then the first step, obviously, is we need to understand those problems. So we need information. So I became a scientist. And I sort of naively thought that if scientists generate information and we share that information with our leaders, then our leaders will use that information to make wise decisions in the public good. Ha, exactly, yeah, thank you. I was completely naive, and that's been brought home to me really, really obviously over the last few years. There's no better example than the climate crisis. We've known about this for decades. We have the information. Nothing is happening. So over the last few years, it's become increasingly clear to me that this isn't an information deficit problem. The problem is not that we don't know, we do know. The problem is about power and influence. And I started to realize that about 4 or 5 years ago, and I realized that if I was to have an impact on this planetary crisis, I would have to become more influential. Simply generating scientific papers, generating information, doesn't work, doesn't count for anything if our leaders ignore the science. So when Extinction Rebellion started in 2018, I just thought this is what I was always been waiting for. I knew that this finally was a way for me to move from just having information about the problems to starting to actually do something about them. And since then, I've left my career as a researcher because I don't see the value in it anymore. I'm doing what I feel is important now, and that's acting with Extinction Rebellion. So why are we here? You're probably all here because you've seen the headlines and you're scared. Millions of other people have seen those headlines too, and now everybody knows. Everybody knows now just how severe the situation we find ourselves in is. But most of those other people aren't here, and you are. Most of those other people also may not have heard the recent United Nations report that says we have a brief and rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable future. It's worth repeating that sentence again. We have a brief and rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable future. How did the UN come to be making such a statement? They have appointed scientific bodies of all the best climate scientists there are. Those scientists have analysed all the evidence, and their considered conclusion is that we're about to run out of time to maintain a planet that we can actually live on. Part of what this statement is talking about is this idea of tipping points. The climate doesn't just get warmer in a linear fashion. As things get warmer, we start to start certain processes that could make it accelerate faster and faster and faster. One of those is the melting of the sea ice. Sea ice is white, it reflects lots of energy back, solar energy that reflects back into space. But when the sea ice melts and it gets replaced with dark blue ocean, the dark blue ocean absorbs that energy and the heating becomes more fast. Another of these runaway processes is what we've all noticed with the burning of forests around the world. Forests store lots and lots of carbon, but as the planet heats up and dries, they're burning and releasing the carbon. So the big fear is we might reach such a state that we reach tipping points. Heating gets to such a state that it starts all these other processes that we then cannot stop. And we might reach a point where it's too late to avoid the worst of it, which is why we need to act now. And of course, we're not talking about problems that may occur in the future. These things are happening now. And you're probably here because you know this. But you're also probably concerned about other issues too. About the cost of living crisis, energy, war, political and cultural instability. And there is a lot going on. These are difficult times for us all. But we have to ask ourselves, what are the hopes of addressing these other crises if we don't get a handle on the changing climate and our natural life support systems? Maybe you're worried that the way politicians and the media are talking about these issues don't rhyme, they don't match with what scientists say is required. Our government in the UK has set a decarbonisation target for 2050. What that means is they're happy to continue making the problem worse and worse and worse for another 28 years. Our governments first agreed to start addressing this crisis in 1992. I'm sure a lot of you remember it. It was the Rio Earth Summit. I was 13 years old. And they said they were going to do something about it. And I believed them. I was really hopeful at that time. Since then, our cumulative emissions have more than doubled. In other words, we've emitted more in full knowledge of the consequences, and since our governments committed to addressing the issue, than we ever did in ignorance beforehand. And that doesn't leave me with a lot of faith that our governments are serious about the next set of targets, the 2050 targets. So where are we now, and where are we heading? This summer has been a real awakening for a lot of people. It's been a summer beyond my worst nightmares. I spent a lot of time thinking how bad things may become. I didn't expect to see what we've seen this summer so soon. We saw what until recently were literally unbelievable temperatures in the UK. We smashed the 40-degree barrier that was beyond our wildest imaginations just recently. It was so hot that things were spontaneously combusting. Just up the road where I live in Norfolk, we had 300 fires in a single day. This is mind-boggling stuff. This has just never happened before. In Europe, last week, both the River Loire and the River Rhine could both be walked across on foot. This has never happened before. The source of the River Thames dried up. The Thames has shifted because it was so dry. There have been deadly heat waves in China, in India and Pakistan. So the current heat wave in China has just blown the minds of meteorologists in terms of the combination of the physical size of it and the intensity of temperatures and the duration of it. It's like nothing that has ever been experienced on planet Earth ever before. In India and Pakistan in the spring, they had a deadly heat wave where temperatures were reaching 50 degrees. For a while, the wealthy were insulated from it. They had air conditioning. But then the air conditioning broke down in a lot of places because it was just too hot. And people were having to cover infants and the elderly with wet towels to stop them dying. And when the water ran out, they had the choice of walking kilometres in 50-degree heat to go find some more water, or just sitting there and waiting for it to get cool again. Once it reaches a certain combination of temperature and humidity, the body cannot regulate its own temperature anymore, and we die. And that was happening on an enormous scale. Immediately following those record-breaking heat waves, Pakistan suffered a second unimaginable disaster, which is still in the midst of it now. Pakistan, I'm sure you've seen the news. This is one of those rare events that has actually made the TV news. 1/3 of the country is underwater now. 1 million homes have been destroyed or badly damaged. 80% of all the livestock in the entire country are dead. And all this is happening, of course, at 1.2 degrees. We have reached 1.2 degrees of warming above pre-industrial temperatures. Our governments have decided that the safe level is 1.5 degrees, which is just extraordinary. And of course, we're not going to hit 1.5 degrees because they haven't put in place policies that will allow us to meet that target. It's easy to forget that, scientists have been warning about this for decades. And we've had the solutions for decades. Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the roof of the White House in 1979. That was the year I was born. I'm 43 years old. It seems like we've been on the edge of a green revolution since forever. But why hasn't that kicked off? Why hasn't that happened? Why was the latest round of global climate negotiations, COP26, which was in Glasgow last year, why was that the 26th failed attempt to reach serious global action? Why is nothing happening? It's easy to set targets and to talk about changing in the future, but what's needed is change now. What's needed now is policies implemented that will allow us to meet those targets, and that's not what we're seeing. The UK government has set a 2050 target, but they're still promoting the development of new oil and gas fields in the North Sea. We have a £27 billion road building programme. We have airports being expanded. We have a new coal mine has been given the go-ahead in Cumbria, and another coal mine in Wales has been expanded. So whilst they're setting the targets, they're taking us in the wrong direction in terms of the actual what they're actually doing. And of course, it's not words that count; it's actions. Many of you might be aware that beyond COP26 and the global negotiations on climate change, we also have global negotiations, global agreements to limit the loss of the natural world. This is called the Convention on Biological Diversity. In 2010, governments of the world agreed 20 targets to address the loss of biodiversity. In 2020, they did a 10-year evaluation of those targets. Would anybody like to guess how many targets were met? 0. I don't have a huge amount of faith in empty targets. We hear about targets from the private sector too. If you watch TV, it's full of adverts from fossil fuel companies talking about how they intend to decarbonise fully by 2050 or 2060, and it sounds great. But then you hear that they are actually committed to spending $103 million per day exploring for more new fossil fuels every day until 2030. Fossil fuel companies are spending hundreds of millions of pounds investing in new fossil fuels, not just in exploiting the ones they already have. They are searching for more. There was a big expose a couple of months ago called these new projects carbon bombs. If you take away one thing from this talk, please look up this phrase, carbon bombs. Huge amounts of money is being invested in fossil fuel projects that, if they ever see the light of day, means we have no hope of sticking within our climate targets whatsoever. As things stand, our government intends to allow twice the amount of fossil fuel production by 2030 as would be compatible with meeting our agreed global targets. The UK launched its energy security strategy in April this year. Rather than focusing on onshore wind and insulation, as all the experts said is needed, it focuses on new oil and gas fields in the North Sea. The two Tory leadership candidates now are competing with each other to see how friendly they can be to the fossil fuel industry. They want to restart fracking, even though fracking will not contribute to our domestic energy needs and isn't economically viable. We're heading in precisely the wrong direction. And all of this whilst in a cost of living crisis, in an energy crisis that has left people unable to pay their bills and is pouring billions of pounds into the coffers of fossil fuel companies. This is a crisis caused by a dependence on fossil fuels, and the government's strategy is to double down on fossil fuels. It just doesn't make any sense. And we know that if governments don't take serious action, that there will be disastrous consequences. We know that it will see the destruction of, there'll be no more coral reefs and tropical forests on this planet. We know that many people's homes, people in Cambridgeshire, in the Fens, your houses will become uninsurable because the Fens won't be defendable. We know we're going to see increasing crop failures and food shortages. This is happening already. Wheat production was down 40% in the UK last year. The year before, potatoes were down 40%. We know it's going to mean wildfires and droughts and floods are going to become more and more commonplace, and just everything about our world and society is going to become less predictable. We know we're going to see massive forced displacement away from coasts. Many of the world's great cities are in coastal areas. Many of those won't be defendable, and we'll see huge migration of people away from the coast. We're seeing this in the UK already. The town of Fairborn in Wales has been decommissioned by the council. The council said, we cannot protect this town anymore. You guys are going to have to leave, and you're not going to get compensated for your properties. Sorry, I'm rambling on far too long, so I'm going to try and be a bit quicker. We also know that it's going to have huge impacts on where people can live around the planet. So there was a study came out last year that showed that places which are currently home to 3 billion people will be uninhabitable by 2070 unless we rapidly decarbonise. The homes of 3 billion people will be uninhabitable. That's a lot to take in, so thank you again for being here. Why is nothing changing? This is, of course, a huge and complicated challenge, and it's hard to keep all of it in our heads, let alone work out what we could do about it as individuals. And millions of people are in the same position, scared, wanting to do something, but not knowing what to do, because of course this is a problem too big for individuals. This is a problem so large and complex that only governments can really do what's necessary. And we need government action because individual lifestyle changes just aren't enough. But fossil fuel companies are spending millions, hundreds of millions, on lobbying and on political donations. And they're getting billions in tax relief and subsidies in return. Fossil fuel companies are always going to be preoccupied with their profits, and that means they have to prevent action that would stop them pumping more fossil fuels. And our governments are always going to be focused on the next elections. They need to be popular. We in Extinction Rebellion, we don't have that constraint. What we need is real, honest leadership. We need to be honest about what's happening, and we need to be honest about what the response to that looks like. The Industrial Revolution started here in the UK, and it had amazing and devastating impacts. What we need now is a new industrial revolution, a green industrial revolution. This has started, it's happening, and in a way it's unavoidable. We have better ways of doing things now than using fossil fuels. But the open question is whether it will happen in time. And that's why we need people power to help accelerate this. Of course, we all know that investment in green jobs and in an economy that can sustain the changes we're coming is obviously what's required. But there are those that do very well out of the status quo. They're invested in the way things are and don't want these changes to happen. So they are putting huge pressure on the governments to slow down this inevitable transition. What we need is to put pressure on the governments to speed it up. So what does XR do, and why does it work? Well, from the start, we've been focused on the reality of what's happening. and of being open and acknowledging what that means. By the time I joined XR in 2019, I'd pretty much given up hope, to be honest. I'd been working in the environment sector all my life, and I'd just seen the problems getting worse and worse and worse. And, I carried on doing conservation work because it's all I know. I'm never going to do anything else. But I never had any hope that we might actually get out of this with some parts of the world intact. And then I heard about XR on the TV. So in April 2019, I went down to London and I took part. And I wasn't part of any group. I didn't go down there with any friends. I was just walking about by myself, talking to lots of people. But I met so many amazing people. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was alone, facing these struggles alone. And for the first time, I sensed some form of just popular uprising developing, and that just gave me hope like I'd never felt. And I realised that the absence of any hope wasn't because the problems were so big. What made me hopeless was that no one was doing anything about it. It was that everyone was just sitting at home going, oh, things are bad, aren't they? And nothing was happening. And of course, we're 3 years further down the line now. Things have got immeasurably worse, but I still feel hope in the way that I've never felt before, because although the problems might be worse, we are at last starting to see a response now. Society is waking up, and people like you and I are doing something about it. And of course, that's the only place where change is going to come from. So I actually feel really positive now, and I can see change happening. And I see more and more people becoming concerned. In fact, there was a poll, a government poll by YouGov earlier this year, that showed the environment and climate change to be the #1 concern for British people. Above COVID, above Brexit, above the NHS, above the economy, above all of it. This is what people care about now. And that's largely because of XR and our sister movements like the youth strikes. So in 2019, XR took to the streets with a few thousand people. We blockaded 4 sites in London, and as a direct result of that, the UK government declared a climate and ecological emergency, and it completely changed the public conversation. Media attention to climate has never been higher. Public concern for the environment has never been higher. And now everybody knows that this is what's going on. And the media make the road out of this sound difficult. They make decarbonisation sound expensive and impossible. And of course, it will be very difficult and it will be expensive. But as we've seen this summer, it's nothing compared to the costs of inaction, of just sitting here and doing nothing. Ending our reliance on fossil fuels means less pollution, it means improved health, it means thriving nature and a fairer society. And of course, ultimately, it means a planet that we can actually live on. And a fairer, safer planet is still possible. But as the UN said, we're running out of time. The window is closing. I've just got one little bit before we finish, but before we move on to that, we're now going to have quick testimonials from 2 local XR members, Laurie and Jenny, who are both going to speak for a few minutes about their experience.
Hello, I'm Laurie. I was brought up in Shropshire, so it's very rural, and meant I was quite isolated as a kid, except for the fact that I felt part of the beautiful ecosystems that were around where I lived. I was quite close personal friends with a lot of trees around me. And I don't remember not being aware of climate change. So for my whole life, I've had this hanging over me, this feeling that maybe there isn't a future. And I think a lot of people my age feel the same. So when I was writing this, I asked myself, why did it take me so long to get into activism? Because I only started with XR in May. And I think the answer is that I had lost hope. So I'm 24, and for a lot of my life I felt powerless, voiceless and disconnected from other people who cared about the consequences, the dire consequences of this system we've created to live in. So when in 2019 I saw on the news that people were massing in London, I felt incredible relief, because finally people were, it was a movement which was not compromising on how urgent and how large scale the changes needed to be. And I wanted to join immediately, but I got pulled away again by life. I was trying to do a degree and I was under a lot of pressure. I was just trying to stay afloat. And it was so easy to get disconnected from something that I had cared about since I was a kid. Now, a couple of years ago, I became a climate scientist, and I've been researching how forests are going to be resilient to climate stress, and the research in my field is terrifying and sad and has implications for millions of people. But it was so easy to get disconnected. I was pretending that my tiny individual contribution was enough, but this feeling kept creeping up on me that it isn't enough. So, as I said, in May, I joined Extinction Rebellion. The message finally got through to me that my feelings of hopelessness and disenfranchisement don't matter to the people who are suffering now because of this system. And I also realised that maybe I have something to contribute to a collective movement. And maybe most importantly, I feel so connected to other people who are caring and who understand that we need to build a community which is diverse and resilient to what's coming. I'm still worried, but I am a connection in a huge network of people who are also worried, but who are also motivated and hopeful at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. Very well put. So I'm Jenny, and I'm proud to have been involved with Extinction Rebellion for some time. And today I just wanted to tell you about one action, one of the many actions I've been involved in. So last summer, I slept over in the Science Museum overnight. That was part of an ongoing campaign against the museum, but to protest against the fact that they take sponsorship money from fossil fuel companies. Of all the museums in this land, they should be following the science, not the money grab! I have to say that. So many groups have been involved in that campaign, but this particular action was coordinated by Scientists for XR. The action was carefully planned, so we all knew what we were going to do, and we knew the possible legal consequences, and we knew to be respectful to the staff and the exhibits. So going in, our bags were going to be checked. So the banners I'd made were secreted round my middle, and I was very fat, and the bags had some extra clothes and some basic sleeping stuff at the bottom. And during the day, I leafleted in the museum and talked to people. And then later on, we all joined together for a march and walked around the museum. And we were chanting, waving our banners and making speeches. And then it was time to go home. So about over 70 of us started making our bed in their entrance hall. Let's say the staff weren't pleased and the police were called. So they came and had a look at us and they started counting us. There were too many of us for them to move on. So we were allowed to stay as long as we behaved. We were a really diverse group of people. We had an open mic so we could tell each other our stories and why we were there. And I had such an inspirational chat with a doctor from XR. She was wonderful and all the things they'd been doing. But I think the highlight for that action was actually the impromptu singing that we had. We were all taught a song that involved lots of actions and got us moving, and we were doing it together, and we sort of sang the evening away. I'm not a natural singer, I hide away from that sort of thing, but I absolutely love this because I felt so part of all that group of people doing it, and I felt we were supporting each other. It was very, very special. It was a pretty uncomfortable night. Banners don't make good blankets, but they did thankfully open the toilets. So in the morning, we had some gentle yoga stretching to get rid of those aches and pains. And we left the museum together, singing away, just before the museum opened, so that we could then meet all the people who were waiting to come in. So we gave them leaflets, we gave them speeches. That was the end of that action. But it was a really special action that I was so glad to be part of. And I know I'm going to remember it for the rest of my life. Yeah, thank you.
We hear stories like that all the time in exile. People, I don't know, people tend to, find their home and meet wonderful friends and find that being part of exile contributes a lot to them personally, and it helps with our mental health in this crisis. But that's not why we do it. We're not taking action to try and feel better. We take action because we have a world to save. We literally have an entire world to save. And nobody else is going to do it, right? Who else is going to do it? Nobody else is. It has to be us, and it has to be now. So how do we win? Well, it's a huge challenge. It's hugely complex, and we know that there are a lot of very powerful interests that want to make sure we don't win because they want to keep things as they are. But we also know that we have incredible strength when we work together and when we use imaginative and impactful tactics. This is crucial. We have to be willing to go beyond traditional methods of campaigning, because traditional methods of campaigning are easily ignored. So we use what we call non-violent direct action. This can take many forms, and sometimes it can take the form of actions that carry a risk of arrest. And some people in XR are in a position where they can do that, where they're able to train themselves up for and volunteer to take part in arrestable actions. And this is very effective because it gets in the news. But the majority of people in XR aren't able to make that commitment. They support the movement in other ways, and their work is every bit as important too. So XR isn't a movement that just came out of nowhere. It is based on research. It's based on research on social movements, historical research. Our actions are planned based on evidence for what works. Non-violent direct action is what's triggered many of the great social changes we've seen over the last century. Votes for women, civil rights for people of colour, civil rights for LGBTQ+ people, these were won by small groups of people refusing to obey until the change happened. We don't know how many people we need, but we do know that the more there are, the greater the pressure will be. And that pressure, according to the evidence from history, that pressure has to be sustained and it has to be widespread. So it has to incorporate all sectors of society. If we have only small numbers of people, then the actions that they take have to be massively impactful to break through the silence and get on the news. If you have only 50 people, then they're going to have to do something really spectacular and get arrested. But if you have 100,000 people, the required action from each of those is much smaller, because we can have big impacts just through the sheer numbers. So in 2019, we managed to completely change the conversation on climate, get the UK government to declare a climate and ecological emergency, and we did that all with less than 10,000 people. It was something that had never been done before. But imagine what we could do now with 100,000 people. This is how we get the next big win, which is an immediate end to new fossil fuel licenses and to all government support for new extraction. It's a big ask. It would require an ambitious strategy on renewables and an ambitious strategy to reduce demand and consumption by retrofitting and insulating existing housing stock, for example. And this needs to be done in a fair way, because things at the moment are currently very unfair. Those that have driven the problem are insulated from its effects, whereas those who have done little to contribute to the problem, like in Pakistan and sub-Saharan Africa, are dying from what we have done in our societies. There was a report published by Oxfam 2 years ago which showed that the 1% global wealthiest have emitted more than double what the bottom 50% have emitted. So 1% emitting double what the bottom 50% have emitted. This is a problem caused not by there being too many people, but a problem caused by overconsumption of the wealthy. I'm sure that everybody here in this room is in the top 10% globally wealthiest. Some of you may be in the top 1%. So this has to be done in a fair way. But if we do get government to make meaningful policy on fossil fuel investment, that will send a very strong signal to the market. It will speed up investment in secure, sustainable energy alternatives that don't cause wars and that don't leave people unable to pay their bills. So we'll win with sustained, coordinated pressure from ordinary people. From 100,000 of us in the streets would make it clear that we are a mass movement representing all sectors of our society and not just a fringe group of radicals. Either we kill the fossil fuel economy or it kills us. It's that simple. There are no non-radical options left here. But, of course, fossil fuel industries are very wealthy and powerful. And those that benefit from business as usual are putting pressure on governments to slow the transition. So we need to put pressure on them to speed it up. Just as the climate is racing towards tipping points that could leave it all too late for us to take any action, so we need to race towards a tipping point, a social tipping point. We need a critical mass of people so big that we cannot be ignored, and we either force our leaders to take the required action or we replace them with those that will. So we're mobilising across the country for this, and we call it Project 3.5. It's called Project 3.5 because social science research suggests that whenever in history, whenever 3.5% of the population has engaged in non-violent resistance, that has always been enough, even to topple dictators. So, according to the research, 3.5% is the magic number. We don't know exactly, this is just one piece of research, we don't know exactly how many people will need to win. But the point is, we don't need 50% of the population, we need more than just a few thousand. So we need you. And it's that simple, really. It's ordinary people demanding the obvious. That's all it is. But when 100,000 of us go out into the streets, this will be an invitation for millions more to step up. But we need your help to build the movement, to connect with others, to join your local group, and if you feel able, to train for and take part in actions. We've done hundreds of these talks up and down the country, and we'll be doing lots more. But it's been a huge amount of effort. A huge team here in Cambridge has made this talk happen. We need more people to make more of these talks happen and to make sure they're as well as attended as this one and to make sure that people are engaged by them. So whether you have 2 hours per week or you're ready to dive in full time, we really need you. And of course we don't have all the answers. We don't propose particular policies. We advocate for citizens' assemblies to allow the citizens of this country to make policy. But if you have suggestions, if you have questions about our methods or there are things you think should be doing better, then join us and make those things happen. We are non-hierarchical. We are nothing but our members. All the actions we ever do are because people like you joined us and said, let's do that, and made it happen. So if there are things you'd like to see us doing, join us, make it happen, and if they fit with our principles, we will do them. We all want the same thing. We all want a planet that we can live on and thrive on. So that means we have to work backwards from that shared goal. And addressing these issues is difficult. It's often challenging. It's hard work. It's tiring. Sometimes it's frustrating. But it's also incredibly rewarding. And everybody in XR shares a few really amazing qualities. They're all people that care. They're all people that are kind, and they're people that have the courage of their convictions and want to make a better world. And it's honestly, it really feels good to be part of that. I've never been so consistently inspired by people as I have been by the people I meet in exile. So we're going to hand over to Julie now, that's going to lead us on a small listening exercise. I've taken too long and spoken too long, but if we have time, some questions will come out of that listening exercise. So if you have questions, raise them in this exercise. Julie will introduce it now. But just to end it by saying that this is our fight. We have the solutions. We just need to make them happen. And while right now millions of people around the world are suffering and dying from this crisis, millions of other people are standing up in resistance. And I look forward to standing in resistance with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlie. That's very powerful. And for Laurie and Jenny's testimonials too. Very moving. I appreciate that you've been sitting listening for such a long time. So now's a chance to wriggle a little bit. Not just yet, but I'd like you to get into groups of 3 this time and have 2 minutes each to talk about your response to what Charlie and Jenny and Laurie have said, anything that's come up for you, anything that you've taken away from that. And also, during the course of these 2 minutes each, chance for you to speak to other people in your group, please could you think of a question that you have for Charlie? There will be people coming around with post-its and pens for you to write those questions down at some point. Well, in the break, you're going to have a break after this listening exercise. Also, when you're listening, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything apart from smile encouragingly at the person who's speaking. Have I covered everything there, Sheila?
You absolutely have. There's just a slight change of plan in that we don't have time actually to do the Q&A exactly. So do think of any questions, and if you can catch Charlie in the break or later on before the event finishes, we'll be having a break after this listening exercise, and then after that we're going to have time in smaller groups of 5 or 6 people to think about where are you really in relation to this. And to find, you can ask questions from people who are more involved. So we want to maximise the time for you to really have a chance to think and process and talk to other people. So yes, by all means, if you have a question for Charlie, think of one, but we won't have a big Q&A, but you can catch him and ask him your question at some point. Thank you. But, yeah, this thanks.
Yeah, you could talk to the person behind you, next to you, a different person maybe from before. Feel free to move your chairs round, but probably a good idea to talk to somebody fairly near you. So, after you've got into your groups, we'll start.
So, starting in early September, which is now, we're going to be putting on a series of big, audacious actions to grab media and public attention, highlighting our failing political system. I don't know if you caught the news. There are a bunch of XR activists glued themselves together around the Speaker's chair in the Commons chamber a couple of days ago. And that was on BBC News. There may be other actions coming. I'm not privy to those at the moment. And then we're going to be having a gathering in London on from Saturday the 10th of September to Monday the 12th. And that's going to be 3 days of learning and connecting with others about direct democracy, these things like citizens' assemblies and so on, about non-violent civil resistance, and about regenerative culture. And that's our kind of word for caring about everyone, including ourselves, while we work together for something big. And then through the autumn and the winter, we're going to be reaching out to people right across the country, talking to people, knocking on doors, connecting with them one-to-one. And then leading up to, in the spring of next year, we're going to be bringing 100,000 people onto the streets of London, and then we're going to stay there. And our demand on the government will be twofold: an immediate end to fossil fuel subsidies and fossil fuel investment, and a citizens' assembly tasked with creating a plan that will take us out of fossil fuels by 2030 in a way that's fair for everyone. And that build up to 100,000 people is not just Extinction Rebellion. We're going to be working alongside other movements, like those organising against the cost of living crisis and the energy crisis and so on. And so this isn't just planning for the next protest. It's a longer term and more strategic thing than that. And there will be many ways that you can get involved. We've organised and made plans as much as we can, but we find ourselves right now at a unique point in human history. No generation of humans has ever had to face what we're facing right now. And so what we will have to do has never been done before. And so we're going to have to respond to this moment in the moment, each one of us stepping up to be our biggest selves. So thank you.
So obviously we would love you to join us. There's a place and a role for everyone, whatever your background and skills, and whether you've just a little bit of time or a lot of time. We will support you to figure out where you can best fit. The best way to stay in touch with us is by the exit door there. You will see there's Alima and Portia helping people to sign up, or you can do it with the QR code. That means you'll get information from us. And we will contact you. If you leave your phone number, there's an option to leave an email and a phone number. If you leave your phone number, it's much easier for us to follow up with you, because we do quite a lot of organising on Signal. on mobile phones. So that's an easier way to get information to keep up to date, really. So we're encouraging people, if they can, to go down to Hyde Park in London for a day at least between the 10th and the 13th of September to join the Festival of Resistance. Go down and get a taster of what it's like. Very, very low arrest risk in that. It's all about learning and sharing and growing the movement. And you can join others who'll be travelling from Cambridge if you'd like to. Don't go on your own. And there will be things going on in Cambridge in mid-September too, if you can't get to London. A good place to find out more is by attending our monthly general meetings, which you can do in person or online. And I was given the date for the next one. It's 26th of September, and it takes place at the Unitarian Church near the bus station, near Drummer Street there. There's always plenty of training and support available for any role that you might choose to do. So 2 examples of what we've been doing here recently. Project 3.5, we've been doing a lot of outreach in and around Cambridge, knocking on people's doors, find out what they think and feel about the climate crisis, and inviting them to a meeting just like this. Maybe you'd like to be part of that. People are a bit scared at first about knocking on people's doors, but actually everyone who does it finds it really rewarding. You don't need to have lots of knowledge. You really just want to be listening to people and finding out where they're at and giving them a chance to step up if they want to. XR Cambridge and XR Cambridge Youth have led a long campaign aiming to get the university to sever its links with Schlumberger, a company which plays a very big and damaging role in oil and gas developments worldwide. Okay, we're now going to break into small groups. You've listened an awful lot, now you have a chance to talk a bit more, but just groups of 5 people.
Lovely. Thank you so much for staying here for such a long time. And I've heard some brilliant conversations as I've walked around the room. So I just wondered if there was any brave person who would like to just in a minute, taking the time of, a minute or a sentence, to just say what they think their next steps are. What they might be prepared to do. Yes, please. You can do it from there. You can come up here if you'd like to.
Hello, I'm Nadia Jamil. I'm British-born Pakistani, and a bit short. Sorry. This is my first Extinction Rebellion meeting, and I am ashamed to say it took 1/3 of my country flooding because of global warming and millions of people dying and becoming homeless for me to wake up and want to be part of Extinction Rebellion. My sister is a filmmaker, I'm an actor, and I have over 300,000 people who I can influence personally, and I would like to invite all of you, however you can possibly, join our forums, to whether it's on Insta Live or Twitter or wherever, so I can hear your voices, so you can educate us. I am sad that there are not any South Asians present in this room right now. Oh, hello! Yay! Sorry, I'm also bad eyesight as well. But there needs to be more of us. There need to be all kinds of people here, and it needs to be a larger demographic. Everybody understands things in different ways, and there's different ways to bring people in and pull awareness in. Use us. We are here. And I'd like to invite you to the mosques, to the temples, to wherever you can come to our public spaces to teach us more about what you know, because we are really lacking in awareness. And thank you so much for doing this, because I'm sitting here looking at all of you and thinking of the people who have suffered and have died in Pakistan, and you are the only people in the world who are actually standing up for them in any real way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was very, very moving. Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to you don't have to come if you don't have to come and talk in the microphone. Just any next steps that you'd like to take.
I walked from London to Glasgow last year. I've been walking from 209 for climate justice. This group said something which really touched me. Knock the door. Every door you can knock. That's the key message. Why would we say that? Because you could not have found a better time than now. There's so much more anguish and suffering here, all connected to fossil fuel. Emission-driven growth has produced obscene wealth, but it plundered the planet. When I walked in 2009 from Oxford to Copenhagen, nobody in Britain thought anything to do with climate change. Last year when I walked, 4 out of 10 said, especially mothers and grandparents, and mostly women, I'm glad there are more men here. So I think this is the right time. It's a fantastic time. People are suffering, but we can actually use this as an old-time campaigner. It is a perfect time for us. Each of us, even if we can knock 1,000 doors.
Brilliant.
My name is Pushpanath. Everybody calls me Push. My site is Go Push Go. When I say Go Push Go, you say climate justice. Go Push Go!
Climate justice!
Thank you.
Thank you, that's brilliant. I'm going to move us on now because, well, we're just going to close unless there's somebody who really would like to share with us.
Julie, I just want to be really quick. They're not standing here, but this was the group I was facilitating. They've done the QR code there and there, they're doing the email, they're going to look at the website, and some of them are going to London on the 10th of September.
Yay! Jenny, thank you, that's what I was going to say. Please do sign up to, the email, or take the note of the email, xr35cams@protonmail.com, and it's over there as well. Please do use the QR code. Please do sign up. There's something for all of you, and we do need you. So, and thanks massively for coming today. Really, really appreciate it. That's it. Sorry, Raven would like to talk to you for 1 second.
Yeah, some of you will, I've seen lots of people have enjoyed the tasty flapjacks. These are brought here courtesy of Cambridge Community Kitchen, an organisation whose work is normally to deliver free cooked meals to anyone in Cambridge who needs them. Times are hard, they're going to get harder even if we win. We need resilience to keep our community together. If you're interested in helping out, or if you're looking at the situations and you say, don't know how I'm going to have a cooked meal every day this winter, then talk to me or pick up a leaflet from the stall. We can give help, we can use help. Thank you.
Thank you, Raven, and please do. You can stay till 5:30 mingling if you would like to. Ask any of us a question, but please don't go without signing up. Alima's there, waving. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you to everybody who had a hand in putting this on. It was a big team of people. Thank you, everybody.